Yeah, level two is less involved than level one. Level one takes a decent amount of coordination with all the like screen sharing and then also like leading students to the different options. This one is a little bit drier, and so I think there's an opportunity to bring in your own examples to make it really true. And so I think because it took such a long time getting through last time, I'm inclined to jump in right now. Basha, do you need to do anything with the recording, or are we good to continue?
It's already recording. I will just cut it later.
You'll cut it later? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. All right, we're going to talk about battling indecision right now, which is our level two class for this upcoming week. And so the idea here is to help people decide and like have tactics in their lives to reduce um, basically the difficulty it is to make a decision. And so last week we talked about adaptability and contingency planning, and we empowered students to think about how to be flexible and to have a mindset on how to address life when it doesn't go to plan. Um, I'm curious if how did it go for people who taught this class? I guess Sasha, I think you taught this class last week, or this week rather. How'd it go for
Yeah,
you?
I taught this Wednesday, and it gets chalked up to you have to one, give yourself breathing room to make decisions. You don't have to always answer everything on the fly. And then, don't be afraid of change. This actually came up today with my daughter because she's afraid to go to a new high school. And so this is gonna be a learning curve for her. And then just sort of trust your instincts in a lot of things.
Yeah. Did
That's
the
all I can
students receive this well?
always.
Always. All right, great. Yeah, I think like my students, they really enjoyed, putting themselves in like situations where they felt like they may not, I think they learned, that they have the ability to adapt. And like, I really tried to stress to embrace the fact that life doesn't go to plan and they have everything within themselves to like push through. And they seem to like receive that well and we're sharing pretty vulnerably of places where they struggled with this in the past. So it went pretty decent for me too. But let's talk about what we're going to talk about this week. So if we go to the next slide, as I mentioned, it's all about battling indecision and explaining why it's hard to make a decision, going through like examples like overload, mental fatigue, and then it gives them practical strategies to address some of the things that make decision making hard and then gives them different frameworks to apply in their lives, which are meant to be like shortcuts to then makes decisions that are more aligned to their values or that are aligned to like what's enough to make a good decision versus just making the perfect decision. So let's go on to slide four. We'll talk about some of the reasons why decision making is hard to make. And generally, it comes down to choice. And so I think in this, oftentimes the paradox is like we think more choice is better, but in reality, more choice is actually harder for the brain to reason through. And it is exhausting when you have to evaluate every single option. And so um, this is sort of like the concept that less is actually more, where if you have less choices, less quality choices, it can actually lead to, better outcomes and having like an abundance of choice. And so in that, in general, like too many choices leads to mental overload. More choices, gives your brain the ability to think that there must be a perfect choice in the abundance of it. And, with that abundance, it can lead to regret because you compare it to options that you didn't choose. Even if those options, like, you'll never really know until like, it is just a thing that your brain does. And so with a number of choices, decision fatigue sets in because you have to evaluate every single one of those things, which is actually more exhausting. And then indecision becomes a habit, like avoiding decisions feels safer in the moment, but then over time, you know, isn't the thing that leads to the best outcome. Because the best thing, as we learned last week, is to just keep on moving in life and to like pick yourself up and go to the next thing and be dynamic in that. And if you can't choose which path to take, it leads to like less favorable outcomes. And so like I would recommend thinking about examples in a student's life as to where this happens today. And like I think the simplest thing is that when you go to the grocery market and there are like 20 different options for peanut butter or jelly or whatever thing they want to buy, it is just harder to go and like figure out which one. It takes a lot more time versus if you had three things, you just have three things in front of you and you just pick the best out of the three and you didn't even think about, the other 20 or however many options there were to decide. And so in that, I think it'd be good to put them in this place of like they're at a menu, they're at a restaurant where they're looking at an abundance on a menu, they're at a market, trying to figure out the best option out of like the 20 there. It's just hard to make a decision and it's much quicker to evaluate three things than 20 things. And so that's just a realization to help them really think about how this example is true in their own lives. Any questions on this before we move on? All right. The workbook question on slide 5 talks about this and how does it affect your ability to move forward. And so this is another way for them to think about when they have been impacted by it in their own lives, whether it be like choosing the classes they have to take in university, choosing, who to date maybe in their school and stuff. There are like many ways that this is probably like applied in their lives, and it'd be good to bounce around to see what options there are or what examples they have in the options they have in their own lives. All right. Slide 6 goes into the practical steps for decision making and gives them sort of a playbook of how to do this in their own lives if they don't feel the best at it right now. And so in that, we just reflected in slide 4 that an abundance of choice leads to paralysis. And so here, the first recommendation in the first step is to limit your options intentionally, to set like a max number. Usually 3 seems to be like the golden rule and what people see in life these days. But in general, like no matter how many options you have, just make sure it's less than everything that you could choose. And the idea here is that cutting down options speeds up clarity, and such. The next thing is to time box and use time limits for small decisions. And so for low stake choices, the recommendation is to give yourself like a minute to just choose. Like if it is like not make or break, if it's like 3 types of peanut butter, that's not like a high stakes decision. So just pick one. Generally speaking, just picking one and making your choice will make you feel better in the long run. And fast decisions conserve energy for bigger tasks in your life. The third practical step is to decide small choices up front and creating defaults. And so whether it be like deciding like I'm always just going to study at my favorite spot, or it's like I'm just going to eat this one meal every single day. Um, Removing decisions and just having defaults can help free up their mind. Um, Sort decisions by importance. This is like a prioritization exercise of like you want to be able to spend time on like thinking through like high impact choices and for like low stake things, quick, intuitive, good enough is like fine. And I think the thing to stress here is that, practice good enough, and for them to really think about if they're chasing perfection instead of progress. And this is a way to connect things to like what we learned last week, where it's most important to like push forward with like a to be adaptable and like figure out because chances are like if the decision that you made wasn't the right one, you can then adapt to the next one. And so it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to like pick the best one that you have in front of you quickly and then move forward. And so the goal here is to reduce effort on low stake decisions to give them the capacity and the energy to spend time on the ones that truly matter. Um, any thoughts here? Cool. Um, all right. And so the workbook question on 7 talks about or gives them the opportunity to think about where recurring decisions, could reduce daily stress. Like for me, like the decision that I make is that like I just wear the same thing almost every day, just a plain shirt and that's it. And that's very easy. I don't think about like what to dress every day or like every day I'm just gonna eat a salad for lunch. And it's just a decision that I've made. There's no wrong answer here unless if they don't answer it at all. But it is like an opportunity for them to like really contemplate where in their lives they can apply this in their own circumstances. Okay, slide 8 talks about more tactics or steps. These are like just general frameworks of how to think about decision making that generally makes things less high stakes. And they go through like different people or like frameworks led by like famous people like Jeff Bezos and Susie Welch. I don't even know if people know who Susie Welch is in this generation, but either way, like the 70% rule, is really just the point of like making decisions when you have 70% of the information, and not waiting for like perfect information to make a decision. 70% generally is good enough. The point here is that making a good decision is better than making a perfect decision, if they are in that particular circumstance. The 10-10-10 rule is like, how will you feel in 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years, to widen their perspective on momentary discomfort. Like maybe in 10 minutes, it's going to really suck to work out, but in 10 months, you're going to like love the body that you have. And in 10 years, you're just going to be happy that you invested in your health. That's an example of how to apply a 10-10-10 rule that's like pretty quick. The two-way door framework is one that helps them really distill, whether this is something that's impossible to reverse or something that's easy to undo. Like, for example, like, uh, okay, I had one, but I'm not sure this is the best one. Like, I mean, fine. I'll just use it for this because we're all adults. Like, whether to have a kid or not. If you're gonna have a kid, that's like a one-way door decision where you can't come back from that. If you are, and so in that, a two-way door decision is like, what am I gonna have for dinner? Like, it doesn't really matter if I'm gonna have salad or meat, or something else. Like, that's easy. Don't spend so much time on it. You can move fast and iterate, and you have chances to like make that better in the future. Pros and cons and consequences. The consequences piece is like the unique one here in this framework where people generally know what a pros and cons list is, but the consequences piece like helps them understand, that there are ramifications to those decisions and gives them the pause to contemplate like what are those consequences for that particular decision to help them just like feel confident of like actually there are like very minimal consequences. I'm ready to go. Let's just do it. It's not that bad if the worst case happens or whatever. And the last one is like a value-based decision, which maybe is the most um, which is one that we've talked about in the past where you have listed your values and your vision that you want in your life, and tapping back into that lesson might be a thing to do here, where you can say like you've identified your values in the past. We've done this in the beginning of last year, and you can weigh your decisions based on the values that you have. Ask which options aligns best with your value, and then this quickly eliminates the noise of like, you know, or makes it very obvious of like, okay, some of these decisions absolutely don't just aren't aligned with who I am and what I value, and that can just like help them make a decision as well. So in general, like these frameworks are meant to help simplify and speed up getting to clarity on the decision that you make, and it ensures your choices match your future and not your fear. And so these are just additional tools that students can use to think through how to make decisions and such. And it could be cool to just say, like, some of you are going to make decisions for, college next year or classes. And so, use some of these frameworks in whatever life thing is about to pop up. Any questions? All right. Um, slide 9 is the workbook question. It's basically asking them like which one do they like vibe with the most and why. Um, and so I think it'd be good to like show maybe the examples again on slide 8 or just list them out somewhere in chat. Like this is mostly for like the YC staff, to like be prepared to like share that.
Okay.
But it's kind of hard to either like if we can update this slide to just have the 5 frameworks that we went through, just so students can remember that versus like trying to remember them off the cuff, that would help them answer.
Okay, Joseph.
Cool. Slide 10 is just like the preview to next week, which is just the right mindset to walk in to life with, to work through challenges and setbacks and things like that. So that in a nutshell is next week's class. Any thoughts, questions? All right, cool. Well, that's it. Thanks
All
for coming to
right.
my talk.
Thank you so much, Joseph. Thank you, Sasha, also for attending.